When we actually talk about financing of any sort of activity, and in this case we're talking of education and scientific education, which is the objective of this seminar, obviously, but it's probably a bit broader, experimental sciences. So the trend is to believe or to ask who is going to finance us. Why? Because we do things that are very important, obviously. Who could argue against the importance of what we do? And in this journey between how is this going to be supported or financed and the fact that we do very important things, we sometimes miss out on a key aspect, which is the element of seduction that is needed. That is, why? Why? The modern world has many necessities. There are developed countries present here and other developing countries. There's hunger, there are wars, there are human rights issues, there are issues in the development and education, there are health issues. You, as many specialists here, there are biologists and doctors, you know it. So what is the reason? What makes the governments, organizations, multilateral organizations, what makes them dedicate financial resources when they have to handle budgets that aren't easy to handle, and how to destine these funds to education? That's the important reflection. For us that are here in this room, it could be very clear. But obviously the world is a bigger place, and there are very serious necessities out there. So maybe if we are more precise in explaining what we're doing and the reasons for why we are doing things, that's very important. The other thing that I would say is that we are approaching this question from a world perspective, not only Latin America. We are here in Chile, of course, and obviously there are more Latin Americans here than anything else. However, this is a global topic. It's not only something where we could say that the developing world or the Latin American world will help, that the developed world helps us. This is also an issue in the developed world, the development of education and science. So we're all on the same boat, so to speak, that we have the same challenge. The third criteria that I would include in our reflection is the question of who are the stakeholders that we have to attract in this exercise of seduction and presenting our arguments in terms of the importance of this. The most obvious destination, obviously, is the multilateral organizations, World Bank, Latin American development banks, or the European development banks in Asia, their counterparts in Africa, and so on. However, this is something, well, some of you may have certain experiences. Unfortunately, the representative of the IADB will not be here today. We've been working with them on certain initiatives, so I may say a couple of things about this that could contribute in this sense. Another important player are the private foundations which are connected to education, many in the Northern Hemisphere, and that today they are very committed with different projects and different areas linked to education. We have the Siemens Foundation representative here, and in that sense it would be interesting to know what is their approach to this topic and what is their perspective in terms of developing education in science. But there's a third element that I think is key and we must be aware of. At the end of the day, each government, the people who are responsible politically for each country, they are going to be the direct responsible of these programs in each country. They may have support, of course, from different programs, but at the end of the day, it's each and every country. And this is when I go back to the topic of seduction. They have to place this among the priorities of a country. These are strategic long-term investments, and we know that governments last between 4 and 6 years. Those that are more strategic move on to 6 years. And for a project of this nature to last more than 6 years, it's not easy. So how can we create national consensus so that these topics are included in government policies? I'd say that's key, because that is where we are going to have the main support. Maybe here in Chile, Dr. Allende could give us more background information about the plight in this country and the excellent results in terms of support received from the government. I would say that these are the ways in which I view the entire problem and how we can discuss our topic. I would propose that we speak freely of our experiences, always trying to focus on international cooperation to support development of education and science. Each and every one works in different areas, but here we've been asked to be very precise and have proposals at the end. I will be taking notes. I hope you can trust my capability of selecting or of summarizing the ideas, and hopefully we can have something that reflects what the group is thinking about. The idea is that we can have all the ideas that we consider important for the final conclusions. I'd say this is the broader context of what we are facing. It's a topic that, as was said last night at the Foreign Affairs Ministry, if we look at it from the perspective of international relations, this is a very positive environment. It's an environment of cooperation and development. The world has many areas where we have to cooperate: energy, safety, logistics, for international trade. It's not easy to agree on these things, but this area, probably we have no doubts or no differences, and the importance is how to precisely reflect the importance that this has strategically. So I would like to open the room for ideas, and I would ask some of the people that have a specific role who are here and who could maybe make specific comments to guide the conversation that we're going to have in the next 2 hours. Maybe Dr. Julio Celis, who works in research projects in the European Commission. He could maybe give us the vision of how this is seen through Europe. What's the approach? What's the sensitivity to these issues in Europe? And again, we have several countries here, Latin American countries, renegotiating their agreements with Europe, and Europe is looking at different ways in which to be more open in their cooperation and their own organizations. So whatever Dr. Celis could say could be very useful. Also, Dr. Early from Uruguay, but with his specific experience in political positions. He's been in ministries and very much linked to the rest of Latin America. How does he see Latin America as a region? I don't know if Bruce Albert is here and he could give us the view from North America. And we have several representatives of Asia who could also speak from those latitudes. As I was saying, within the context of foundations and organizations, maybe Natalie from Siemens could also reflect on how they see the support to the development of these projects and what is possible to be achieved today. So please, I would like to open the floor. I have sort of insinuated some potential participations from all of you, and I would be guiding the process of the conversation. Maybe we should focus on this and then guide ourselves.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Before I start, I would like to thank Jorge for the kind invitation. As a matter of fact, I was the first pregraduate student of Jorge, and ever since ever since, he has been my mentor in many things. And many people who said, if Jorge gets into something, sometime it's going to turn into gold. And I think this has been true in many ways. Now, I'm not going to talk on behalf of the Commission. The Commission is very strict about what they have the last say. I'll just talk as a member of a small group of scientists that provide evidence-based advice to the Commissioner, Moedas, who is the Commissioner for Research and Innovation, in order to derive policies. Now, this is a rather small group that is divided in 3 subgroups based on the priorities that Europe has today. The main priority, of course, is innovation. We work in the Innovation Union. The Innovation Union is the flagship, is the instrument that the Commission has to implement growth in Europe. Now, there are 3 areas that the Commissioner has identified as priority. One is open innovation, the other one is open science, and the last one is open to the world. Now, I belong to the open science and to the open to the world, mainly because the open to the world involves science diplomacy. Europe is open to the rest of the world, in particular keen in interacting with China, with Latin America, and with the United States. To be able to join forces in problems or challenges that cannot be solved by any single country on its own. Now, I must say the main issues there are big challenges, where there is climate, energy, migration, infectious diseases, and so on. But there are many possibilities because this has just been started, all right? And the purpose of this group is to give advice on where to go. And I think I'm going to go that in some more sort of detail as I go along. Now, the other group that I belong is the open science. Now, because of the new developments, there is a need to collaborate. No single lab, country, or even continent can actually solve some of these major challenges. So there is a need to collaborate. Now, with the incoming digital technologies, it's possible to do big things, provide big data. So one need to do that. We need to share data, and we need to have open access to publications. Now, these are priorities that need to be tackled with. And the open innovation is, of course, the main aim in terms of increasing the number of jobs, growth, economic growth, and well-being. So there is a lot of incentive to go into translating fundamental discoveries into the market, being there science-driven innovations or where they are technology-driven innovations. Now, I think whatever you're going to do, you have to realize that Europe works on 7-year framework programs. We are now in Horizon 2020 that goes from 2014 to 2020. All right. Now, once the programs are settled, then it's very difficult to change them. All right. So let's say if I think that you would require support for education, being perhaps through the Erasmus program, for example, you would need to have actually influence the decision at the very earliest stage, so that can be put into the discussion when a legislation is made. Now, we are in the middle, no, we're in the middle, a third of Horizon 2020. But now we are undergoing the evaluation of this program. Already at the end of the year, the Commission will go through a consultation and will ask the whole community about their views on questions that they pose, whether the instruments they use are correct, whether the mechanisms for evaluation are correct, and so on and so forth. So by 2017, we should have already a proposal for the next framework program that goes from 2020 to 2027. So that means if we miss that window of opportunity, then you have missed almost 10 years. All right, so you have to start thinking about. Now, we have done that in Europe by trying to get the scientific community to work together, to create a constituency for science. All right, so we actually join all the basic sciences, life sciences, mathematics, physics, astronomy, humanities, social science, with the idea that we should agree on common priorities, instead of just saying, well, money is what we want, because politicians said, well, every single scientist wants money. What we want is a program. And what we need is a vision, a mission, and a roadmap. How are you going to implement that? So we work within the scientific community on the basic science, and now, for example, the biomedical science has also united. So we have cardiovascular, cancer, diabetes, respiratory disease, neurological disease, and they all actually agree what we should do in common. Now, coming back to the fact that I sit with the as advisor to the commissioner, then the commission put questions to us on these various programs or priorities, whether it is science diplomacy or whether it is open science, a new way to actually make science as it will happen in the future. And then what I do, and I hope a lot of other people will do, I take the questions that the commissioner wants to, and we have a small group, we'll work it out, and then I undergo consultation. I work with several organizations where I put the questions. They are sent to the basis to all the participants in those organizations. And then you get the response, and then you put all these responses together, and then you present that to the commissioner in the form of a policy paper that I have to write, where I make recommendations for the commissioner itself or for the member states. Because as you said, for us in science, science is a competence of the European Union. So the Commission has the right of initiative, all right? But there are others where it's not a competence of the Union. Education, for example, is not a competence of the Union. Now, the member state can work with the Commission to do something, but they cannot really initiate new things on. So we need to understand that, and especially in the biomedical science, if we want to take health as a major challenge, we have this problem that research is a competence, health is not a competence of the Union. So when you do cancer research, you go from discovery to cancer treatment and care, and then you have these gaps. And I think it's very crucial that DG Research doesn't really work with DG Santé, which is the health. The research minister do not really work with the health ministers. So it's very difficult to, and at the end of the day, anyway, it is the finance ministers in every country who decide what the budget these areas are going to have. So you really need to have this to be able to have an impact. So we actually develop that in a way that we have the possibility to provide evidence-based advice to be able to make changes that are accepted by the Commission. But that requires that you really put your act together, that you really put your time, you identify leaders within the scientific community, that you identify champions within the member states to be able to have some of these things done. And in Europe, it's clear, if Germany, France, and the UK are with you, chances are that you can really get somewhere, because they pay most of the budget of the European Commission. So I think it's something very important that we learn, and that unless you really put your time, organize the basis of it, produce evidence-based advice, then I think this work. Eventually, the politicians identify some of these things as an object of desire, something that when you get to certain step, every single politician like to take it and move it to the next step because it's something that they think that is going to work. And most of the politicians will say, you know, if you have an idea or you have a proposal, make sure that everybody agree. Because if I say yes to you, I have to say no to somebody else, and I'm not going to win. Nobody is going to win. So, I mean, these are the sort of things that, there are many things underlying all of this, but it is important that the member states play their role. Otherwise, you can get industry, you can get, but at the end of the day, it is it is actually the ministries and the countries themselves who put most of this money. And at the end of the day, you should realize that research is the only tool that society has to be able to fight these challenges. And then if that is correct, then of course one is well aware of the knowledge triangle between education, science, and innovation. So if you move innovation, then you have to make sure that what are the consequences of that, because the priorities that will be decided for the next framework will have an influence on secondary education, because it could be that are topics where a new workforce is needed, for which you will have to attract the young or teach the young scientists, the young students, to be able to have the workforce at the end, because they select the right professions to be able to fulfill. So I think all of these need to work as in some way articulated. It's very hard to work with one part and not the other. And I think we at the end, I also identify the European Parliament as a way that we can play with, because the European Parliament is elected by the citizens, all right? The commissioners are selected by the countries, all right? So that means we can bring in society at large to be able to influence decision makers at that level. So I think this is what I can say up to.
Thank you, Dr. Celis. I think what you're saying puts some clarity. First of all, in how can we develop a relation with Europe? The interesting thing with Europe is that today you're talking about openness. And openness that had to do with science, because science is a kind of common platform for connecting countries, initiatives, population, and science education, which we're looking for, is based on that. And in a certain way, because we have not too many common languages today in humanity, science starts to be a good language for talking together. And I love this connection with the diplomacy. More than diplomacy for science is science as diplomacy,
Yeah, science
which is the way we need to learn this. And this is the way we need to see it. So thank you very much, Dr. Celis, on this. Perhaps, Dr. Ehrlich, how you see this from Latin America?
Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to congratulate the organizing committee, particularly Jorge Allende. This has been a wonderful, wonderful days of talks. I would like to take a few minutes to share with you some reflections. I come with a few prepared ideas, and I've been hearing all of you speak, both yesterday and today. And let me just say that I've almost flip-flopped on my opinions. It's been very enlightening. So I have to rewrite the script a little bit here, and to share with you, therefore, a few ideas which have come up just by listening to the different, hearing from your different experiences all over the world. Now, the experiences that have been presented here are testament to the fact that we have a very powerful tool in front of us. So how to get more resources to have an even greater impact is the problem, or the question. It wouldn't be just a resource problem. We're also dealing with very complex issues, and we've got lots of obstacles to overcome to transform our educational systems, which are plagued with some inherent problems. And this is one of the systems that creates a lot of difficulties for many countries, and which keep us up long hours. So here we have a sort of, to give it an allegory, a sort of thermodynamic problem. That would be one point. With a more biological or biochemical outlook, we'd add to the thermodynamics, we can add kinetic energy. And the problem with that double outlook or view, and often we look at biokinetic and we see other factors together. And by listening to one of you yesterday, I heard the word, when dealing with the question, why use this teaching by putting this hands-on teaching if we have computer tools that do everything for us now? And very, very good things were said. This is like fermentation, so to speak, that chemical process, and that would be the key in that metaphor. I believe that one of the challenges, based on what we've been sharing these past few days, has been to increasing on what we've been doing. However, we can multiply either by 5, by 10, and Mexico proved that each initiative of theirs cost about $10,000, and I think it was quite clear from their presentation that it was a drop in the ocean in terms of the population of the country. So you can multiply it by 50, by 100, and you still won't reach the mark. This happens to some extent in many countries, so we have to think that the leap that is ahead of us is from the pilot experience, which has been very positive, and we should move to a more catalytic phase, catalysis. For biologists thinking about this, you think about enzymes. We have active sites on the enzymes that have their velocity constant. We need to increase the amount of enzyme as well as the speed of each one. That would be the challenge, how to get this done. This analogy would sort of reflects the problem we're dealing with. So we have a primary level, which would be at the government level, educational systems, and more than just political bias, which has plagued Latin America. We have, and we will have political bias here on out. But the difficult part is to get a serious commitment with these issues, which transcends politics completely. Moreover, we have been witnesses and we have been participating in an amount of signed agreements to complement each other on a worldwide level, and I believe this represents a sincere commitment. However, this is very difficult to turn into practice. Now, there's long time constants which transcend government administrations, so it's very difficult for governing politicians, as committed as they may be with this issue. It's a problem for them to see longer than the short term, because we need to reap knowing that we've sowed for many, many generations. We have to be very productive. Now, why did I start with this? Because here there's a very clear role of the international system in international cooperation, which can ensure not just resources, but they can also ensure working with different time constants, which allow for a greater permanence en lieu of oscillations, something more constant and stable, so that these programs can keep going with their transforming effect. This would be my conclusion. And what I'll be telling you, everything what I'll be saying now is just to illustrate in terms of what I had to say. But if we could see the slide. No, I do not believe it's on the screen. If you could go back. It has a violet sort of border. No, not that one. This one. From what we've been hearing in the past few days, a few key points arise, which are summed up here on screen. It's clear that the role of educators and teachers cannot be replaced. And we can't forget that ever. Point 2. There's been significant increases on the parts of countries in terms of their investment in education. There's been good data we've got from the Caribbean, a lot of growth there. Now, we still need to accrue more and more resources for these initiatives. I think we can also agree on the fact that education cannot be split from very complex social issues. You cannot divide the two. And point number 4, and I think you'll also agree with me, that the solutions cannot be just these magic bullets, these silver bullets, one overnight cures. The structures and curricular propositions are important, but they're not cure-alls. But what we've been seeing these days in terms of abilities, the transforming ability of this very protagonic action, this very enthusiastic action, this has been a significant element. These are some of the elements that arise when discussing these issues. If we could move on, please. Now, in several presentations, some elements came up, which I would call premises or assumptions, which could guide our actions. I believe this is a consensus among scientists. That one, as you can see on screen, knowledge spreads when shared. And if you look at the history, look at this timeline, a testament to this would be the apparition of libraries in the Renaissance, the printing press, the first academies, academic institutions. Here we have the Royal Society in 1645, it was set up. What we can extrapolate today, with a small example, we do everything on cloud computing. We've gone from that to this. Here you can say, a quote from the 1500s says, building up a library which has no limits in the world itself. This is something that Erasmus said in 1508. So we're dealing with a very favorable, formidable situation that were cooked up in the minds of these people almost 600 years ago. Here's some other assumptions. I believe we can agree on most of them. Number 2, the future needs more science and more people linked to scientific efforts. Science education contributes when it comes to the creation of full citizenship. Science is also a part of culture. This is central. Culture creates identity, a sense of roots, sense of citizenship. Point number 4, which I believe was quite clear throughout the presentations, would be that the manner in which students, how students learn is fundamental. And the way which they grasp concepts should be the engine for this transformation. Point number 6 is that the science education link might help to break down the barriers that have been limiting us in our countries. So we have to reflect on this link and its transforming capability. Point 7, and what concerns us all, how to move faster and how to go even further. And point 8, which deals with our nature and with the history of sciences, which show us the way. It's the force and the contribution that science can do to social transformation, which is the creation of a generous scientific community. And the last 2, this is about, for a conclusion, number 9, the time is now. There's never been a better time. We don't have to wait for anything. This is the time to act. Point number 10. This implies the tasks that we have ahead of us. Coordinate, synchronize, how to converge, to bolster our capabilities so we can attain the ability that we want so much, that we've been talking so much about. So that's what I mean when I talk about the role of international cooperation, to ensure that of ensuring our ability to work on timeframes that are longer, especially within such short time frames of administrations, which often do not last very long. If we could move on with the slides. And here are other initiatives which might be more evident, promoting international initiatives, coordinating institutions, creating them, an international fund or trust, and the efforts on the countrywide level and the foundation level or education department level. Here we can create a trust or a fund that fosters learning through research, through experimentation. This doesn't seem as unattainable as it used to. We can also have shared websites, which allows for libraries and which will allow for publications, electronic publications on specific issues that can help us and which talk about what's being done in each corner of the world. And we also waiting to see what international organizations can step in to help us move forward. Which can step forward. That's one of the answers that we have to provide. And with this in mind, I wanted to reach my final slide, which sums up the complexity here. This would be everything that, these are all the logos that are acting in Latin America and the Caribbean. I must have forgotten a few, but you'll recognize some of the logos here. I hope there's nothing missing here of the people at least participating in this event. But here I put all the pictures so just to show how complex coordination could be. And we're still missing some here. So there are resources moving around, the investment, it's significant here. We can't have redundance. If we are, it must be safe redundance that gives us many opportunities, different channels for development. So here we need a necessary convergence that needs to take place. This is a challenge that I'm placing before you, for which I do not have the immediate answer, of course. But this is why we're talking here, just to see how we can move forward. This is what I wanted to share with you, and I wanted to resist the temptation. Here's the final slide. The time is now. We're living in a time full of promise, but full of contradictions, and we need to resist the temptations. We need to avoid a tale of two cities, so to speak. I believe that each era has its own inherent problems or issues, but this is something that is very applicable today. So, this is wanted to share with you today.
Usually we're not used to listening to people that say, well, I'm going to change what I'm going to say because I heard something before. So it's not a normal reaction. It was really refreshing. I would say two more things, together with the different elements that Dr. Early proposed about what could be the fundamentals of some form of declaration from this meeting, something that could come from a policy. Why education in science is so important. Why is it so important today? There are a group of ideas that are coming about because of these meetings, and we could maybe have some form of declaration and that we could share that could be the foundation of what we're doing. There could be concrete experiences. There could be a trust of some sort. Latin America is different to Europe, where you have the Horizon 2020 and there are other mechanisms in other continents. But Latin America is a specialist in fragmentation. It's very difficult for all of us to have joint efforts, specifically having a fund for science, technology, and innovation, for example. This would be something very interesting to see what experiences exist. Maybe we can give a new twist to the conversation. Maybe if we have the view from Asia now, maybe Dr. Mansour Sombra could share with us some of the ideas of how this is viewed from Asia. Obviously, the floor is open for the intervention from anyone. I'm just giving these geographic interventions at the beginning to give a broader perspective.
I just wanted to actually say in between, but then there was another speaker, the Excellency Commissioner from the European Union. I think Horizon 2020 is a quite big program, but as he said, everything was developed much earlier on, and now is the time to prepare for the next phase. But the level that you spoke about clearly, to my understanding, leaves not much for the scientific community to do, but the political level, at the country level, to pursue that kind of approach. Only then, because under that global international linkages that the European Union is looking at, for example, I take just one example of EU, same would be true for other, donor countries or USAID and so on. The political, I think, influence comes much stronger. Although we have seen, and you all would have seen, that if people like you, Ambassador, who have a good understanding of the science and education aspects, when they are at the policy level or in the governments, they can then bring about certain points to the front, or be a kind of champions or sort of flag carriers to push certain aspects. But then obviously you need to remain linked with the relevant communities, in this case the scientists and educationists, to actually have that feedback and a continuous flow of that information and knowledge and the experiences as how to continue to innovate ways and means for coming together. But if we talk about the banks also, may it be Asian Development Bank or World Bank or so on, there again I think the political leadership has far more influence. One of the things that I also advocate, that perhaps more and more educationists and scientists should get involved in some of the political activities, so that they go into the parliaments and then also use the power of this education and science diplomacy to do some of the nice things. Because now we see that it is not really, issues are not country limited, not region limited even, they are really global. And we have to think in that context. And if I give just two examples of the migration issue of the refugees or the terrorist activities, you would see that without globe coming together, we will not be able to solve. Yes, some of the solutions we will find in the scientific and educational aspects, at least the start of that. But overall, I think at a bigger level we have to think. I mean, I not just as a Pakistani, but as a global citizen, that's how I feel. Thank you, Excellency.
I think the vision you have from Asia in a certain way combines two things which we need to keep in mind permanently. Scientists need to educate politicians in a good sense. Means they need to learn and understand what we are talking. Perhaps Dr. Ellis can tell us how they do this, because he has been a politician as a minister and also a scientist. So this is one thing. On the other side, we need to meditate more about which is the role of the multilateral organism that exists around the world in different realities, like in Asia or in Latin America, etc. Sometimes it's not a matter of how we can get from them the funding for doing things like, in this case, education for science. But the role they can get, they can have, is to how to coordinate national efforts, which is not only to put money around, but because the problem with I take the experience of Latin America. For us, the main difficulty is how to get coordinated between the governments. And we have a lot of very sophisticated juridical rules that it's very difficult to get to organize regional projects, for example. But for example, the Inter-American Bank can do that for us, and each country can put money around or can get the debt in order to get to constitute a fund on that. So multilateral institutions, if we use them intelligently, really can be of good help in terms of what we are doing. Because I agree with what Dr. Sombro was saying, everything is now global. We need to wait that way. It's not only a matter of one country to do certain things. So this is a reflection that we need to go, because finally that's the way we need to invent the way that things can be organized in order to push ahead with the education for science.
Natalie Siemens from Siemens Foundation, as you kindly asked me to give a bit the perspective of a foundation, an internationally working foundation, unfortunately not globally working foundation. I think I would like to come back to two words which you have used, innovation and openness. And then there was the word of the thermodynamics. I think I would like to humbly add two more words, which are transformation and being close. So one thing I learned from my business background, if I can put it that way, is in times of transformation, you have to be quick. And to be able to be quick, you have to be close. And I think what we are facing now in this world is a huge transformation. It's a paradigm shift. Be it climate change, be it the gap between the rich and the poor, be it digitalization, be it terrorism, everything is so much in a phase of a paradigm shift. And the quicker the transformation and the more important the transformation, the closer we have to be to react fastly, and also to make sure that we don't make mistakes. Because if we go a wrong way and everything is so quick, then consequences are much worse than in a much slower process. So maybe something now from civil society organization, not that much from the broad political perspective, just the way how we work, which is humble, but I think there are two aspects of the transformation and the being close which could be of help. So I believe to be close, you have to be local. If we start developing the top-down stuff, we don't have the time to wait for all the top-down stuff. So this is why we work very, very closely with our local partners. This is the best way to implement and to create experiences. On the other hand, and this is now the rather top-down aspect of being close, is about institutionalization. So if we can't get together with the institutions, then we will not have the long-term effect, and it will stay a pilot. And the world is full of pilots. We have so many pilots. We love doing them, but in a way, hey, this pile of pilots is maybe not helping if we don't get it into the institutions. So that means for us at the Stiftung, again, just our little way of trying to feed into this bigger picture is that we have created something which we call STEM region. We have first set this up in Germany, which is a very, very simple idea. Get all stakeholders around one table. Seems incredibly simple, is incredibly hard to achieve. So we started around the area of Hamburg, and from the experiences we have with this STEM region idea, we've also started to do something of the like in Peru and in Chile. There are STEM forums, in a way, STEM regions being brought together, and they exactly regroup the people that have been addressed by all other speakers before me. It seems so commonsensical and so simple, but it's quite hard to be done because everybody comes notoriously with their own agenda, with own focus, and that is nothing immoral, it's just systematic. So to try to bring these kinds of STEM regions together would be one way to create experiences which would then hopefully be able to feed in, I mean, talking about this region, to the Pacific Alliance. So, I mean, there is in the treaty education one of the most important points. We have the chance to fill this with content and then regroup these smaller, more regional international cooperations, maybe together on a world level. But if we try to, I mean, I'd love to do the global STEM region thing, but whom would I ask? It would be difficult to decide. But I think if we go in that way, we will hopefully be close enough and quick enough to be part of this transformation and not to be rolled over. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Yo soy Jorge Sequera, soy el director regional de UNESCO para Latinoamérica y el Caribe y trabajo en educación. Primero que nada quiero agradecer al doctor Allende y al antiguo ministro Eldridge de Uruguay, que conocemos bien, por su gentil invitación. Con su permiso, ¿podría yo cambiar a español? Sí, muchas gracias. So I will now move on to Spanish as a courtesy to the host country. I would like to answer the question of the President a while ago in another way. What happens if we don't invest in education in sciences in a country or in a given social group? And the answer is everything that is going to be lost in terms of innovation, in terms of creativity, in terms of competitiveness, how a country or a society is going to be depending on others because the inputs are going to be imported and manufactured and produced by foreign entities. So there's an entire dimension of inclusive development that is linked to investment in education in science. And I want to be very clear, education in sciences starts in the classroom. That's where it starts. In reality. And I have to say that the current situation in our region, Latin America and the Caribbean, is not good in terms of the quality of the education. We have clear evidence in primary education where we have evidence from 16 countries where in maths, science, and reading, children from 3rd to 6th grade in primary school are not learning the necessary tools, the minimum necessary skills to move forward in high school, secondary school, and beyond. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the linkage of education and science, and especially how to train teachers in a better way to improve the situation. Second point that I want to mention is the social valuation of sciences. We have to demystify that science and maths and chemistry is very difficult, or it's something extravagant, or doesn't generate employment. This is a campaign of awareness, an information campaign that we have to be working on a permanent basis. It's not just a few spots here and there in TV. This is something that has to go hand in hand in a society in the way there is consumption of information regularly. For example, in the region, we do not have technical professional training and apprenticeships, which is the motor of economics of all countries in the OECD, except for the US for special reasons. But in the other countries, these companies, small SMEs that nurture themselves from this professional specialized training. And the reason why this apprenticeship or the trades learning doesn't occur in our countries is because there isn't social valuation or value given to these and all these investments that could be generated, these companies, well, they can't develop because of the very little value socially that these different careers receive. And it can be shown because the quality of life and the income of people that have graduated from these careers, sometimes it's much better than of many university careers. But the social value given from parents, society, governments, the students themselves, it's not enough to be able to develop these professional trades. I also want to mention about the cooperation South-South and North-South. Science is there. It's a strong tool for countries to work among each other, and especially with countries from the North, exchange of students, technologies, experiences, and so on. But we have an issue, and somebody mentioned it, a colleague from the Siemens Foundation in Germany, institutionality. How many ministries of science and technology do we have in the region? Hardly any. What we have is national councils of science and technology in many of our countries. I'm not saying that we need to create more institutions and ministries, because that's more bureaucracy and more budgets and more public servants. But we do have to strengthen and give greater autonomy and weight and more budget to the entities that we have that already work in science and technology, and link them to the programs of studies, to the educators, and to the vision that we have of countries. This linkage has to be strengthened. Not necessarily generating more institutions, but strengthening the one that we have. But yes, we could also be creating ministries linked to higher education. The important thing isn't creating the institution, is giving the budget to those entities, empower them so they can keep moving forward. An important issue that we have in the region with science, and especially education in science, is that everything becomes a project. These projects, unfortunately, when there's a change of government or a change of a local government or a governor, the project fails because it hasn't been institutionalized. We have to develop a long-term view in which science is integrated to national development and therefore to the national budget in a vision or a mission for the country, not in a 4 or 5 year period. It's a long-term thing. It has to be institutionalized. This is a very important solution in the long term. There has to be consensus around this, bringing together all the political parties and all the sectors, including the private sector, the civil society, and obviously governments. That's a solution that looks to the long term. But in the shorter term, the good news is the following, and I'd like to conclude with this. In September last year, all the member states of United Nations approved the Sustainable Development Agenda for 2030, which contains 17 goals. The number 4 is education. And in that goal, number 4, we mention specifically the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEM. And that agenda that contains these 17 goals is integrated for all countries, not like former declarations where countries from the north said, this isn't for us, this is for the southern countries, Latin America, Africa, Asia. No, this is for each and every country, even the most advanced. This allows us to work in a joint manner. And we are just starting the design in each country of how to respond to the educational challenge 2015-2030. And for example, in a country such as Chile, but it could be in others, Uruguay, Brazil, and the region. And here we can insert the power and the scale of science and education in science. But it has to be included into a national vision of development linked to education. We have a solution. We have an instrument. Science, technology, innovation, and everything else. We can generate this in our region, but we have to take advantage of bringing together the efforts from the civil society, the private sector, and obviously governments. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Jorge. Creo que
Thank you, Jorge. I think the vision of an organization of United Nations, such as UNESCO, is key. I would say that towards the end of last year in a seminar in Montevideo in Uruguay, where we analyzed the 2030 goals. That this is a very quick analysis of that. Well, in more than half of them, science is at the root. If we're talking of climate change, the science is there. If we're speaking of education, also. And in different areas related to health, science is there, present. This common language that we're talking about and the need to be educated in this sense is key. Another important element of what Dr. Sequeira was saying is this issue, well, he was speaking of projects. They could be these so-called pilot programs. We have to rethink this in terms of public policies, in terms of policies built around consensus, stable over time. Not only that they conclude after a government or when the financing is over. This obviously requires cultural change and reinforcing institutions. If Dr. Sequeira was mentioning how to connect education and science with the objectives of 2030, I think it's very concrete, very important what he said. The objectives of the millennia, which were fulfilled at that moment, these were very important at their time. They brought together efforts and brought about good results. The evaluation has been very good. And from here we have then on the new goals. We need to see how we are capable of incorporating the issue of education in science, and all the other issues derived are part of this new. My name is Guillermo Fernandez de la Garza. I'm from FUMIC and INOVEC, organizations that work on these topics, and I'd like to make 3 comments. The first is to highlight what Nathalie von Siemens said, which I think is very important in terms of locating or being precise in which is the model that's going to be used for working. In the teaching of science, for many, many years, we have had the big problem that it has not been understood that what we are after is not that the teacher comes and teach science. We want the child to learn science, making science and developing capabilities with all these models that are these investigative learning methods. And that's why we're here. And in this sense, I think the meeting that we had last week was very important in UNESCO. And I want to congratulate publicly Dr. Datolicho, because he achieved something really important, that children would actually go to work with this investigative methods right there at the UNESCO before the actual officials of UNESCO, so that they could actually see. Sometimes it's very difficult to take people from UNESCO to schools so that they find out what this type of teaching is about. So we really have to be very precise to achieve the results we want. If not, we're going to keep on stumbling. In particular, for Latin America, I think that we are very weak in terms of international cooperation. I would like to highlight that we have to reinforce the links, the programs that could come about from the Organization of American States. We need to take advantage of the programs of the Inter-American Development Bank. We have to be practical and focus on reality, because if not, we're going to be talking a lot. We have excellent conversation and discourses, but things remain the same. And I'm very concerned that programs that are very successful, such as Etnia here in Chile, have gone up and down, up and down. Fortunately, right now, they're doing quite well. But we are also seeing this reality in many countries of Latin America. It's a conceptual problem. It's a problem of communicating adequately this concept. And I think what is key here is that we really focus this is an issue only of teachers and scientists. This is a general problem of society. If we don't act soon, we will not achieve the millennia goals or the United Nations goals, and not even the minimum. What Natalie was saying, progress is so fast and they have such huge impact that if we're not prepared and we don't prepare our children and our youngsters, their future is going to be worse than ours. It's a huge responsibility that we have to achieve results. And to do this, we have to be very focused on what really makes sense.
Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, I was going to keep quiet because I want my colleagues from Asia to have a chance to speak. But Guillermo actually mentioned me what I have done in UNESCO last week. I think that in the institutionalization of IPSI, the most important organization for the developing countries is definitely UNESCO. Because it's not only about education science, but it's very much about culture. Because if you look at developing countries in Africa, countries like in Asia, a lot of them are actually colonies of US and Europe. And they were drawn as a country in European, what they call, councils of war or peace. Just draw a circle on a map, many tribes of different ethnic group, different religion, then grouped together as a nation. And they actually are fighting among one another within the country. So the education system, like in Malaysia, in most of Africa, the most important thing is building national unity. It's about having a common language, a shared value as a country. So we cannot actually say that science is very important. Science is not that important. The basis is to build stability and peace and understanding of the different ethnic groups within a so-called country. But within the what you call the national education curriculum, which is designed to build national unity, for example, having a common national language and also tolerance of different religious and ethnic practices, we could actually, in that curriculum, inject elements of inquiry-based science into it. Right? For example, not talking about science, but talking about history, like geography, you can tell the students, like for example, in history has been so much more evidence-based with sort of the injection of the element of economics. Why during certain times of a dynasty, like the Islamic dynasty or the Chinese dynasty or the Indian dynasty, the prosperity of the country is very, very high. It was because, of course, that the economy of the country was high. So now the history is not just about legends of war and peace and the conquest of empires, but also about the development of the economy during the time of prosperity and also the decline of the empire because of poverty and disaster. And in terms of geography, now with remote sensing, satellite imagery, you actually define the boundary, whether it's the ocean, the line. So you can tell the children that even within the arts area, that this inquiry based using the scientific discovery method is very, very effective. So this is one thing why actually I advocate UNESCO to embrace IPSI, because every developing country, the education policy and the national education curriculum are dependent on advice from UNESCO. Whenever there is a review of education policy or curriculum, experts from UNESCO are brought in. And what we have found so far, it is very conventional. Their advice from UNESCO had never been said that it should be inquiry-based now in your method of learning. So by actually embracing IPSI, by bringing Irina Bokova as now the advocate of IPSI, we hope actually to get all of UNESCO to have this mindset change that education, the evidence-based, inquiry-based way is the right way. So that's why I hope that you all will work to get UNESCO to have this mindset change. Now, why was last week's meeting important? Because 46 countries ambassadors to UNESCO, the delegation of member states to UNESCO, or their representatives, were at the meeting. And they were astounded by this group of French children, 6 years old, having such confidence in demonstrating the principle of science. And these are the shareholders of UNESCO. So we are going to work, through them, the National Commission of UNESCO, the heads of mission in UNESCO, to try to also support Irina Bokova to change her mindset inside UNESCO. So this is a global picture. Now, as far as Europe is concerned, I have been actually, because ISTIC represents South-South cooperation, that means developing country. So I have been actually very bold in approaching the European Institute of Innovation and Technology head office in Budapest. And I told them, because they were set up in 2009 and ISTIC was set up in 2008. So 2009, I first went to see them. I said that your market is in the developing world. If you have innovation, you have new technology, it is not just for Europe. The bigger market for you is in the developing world, and ISTIC representing the developing world, we could be the bridge for you for the developing world. So last year, I went back to this European Institute for Innovation and Technology, and now they have grown. They have grown into so-called the knowledge innovation cluster communities. They are linking 200 over universities within the European Union in new technology, new renewable energy, new material. So I actually told the director, together with Manso Sorum, we went to see them. I said that, look, now why don't this linkage of university corporations inside European Union for innovation and new technology now link with similar institution in the developing world? So he said, that's a very good idea. What do we do? I said, look, let's do very simple things first. Like, for example, in the Korean Advanced Institute for Science and Technology, KAIST, is one of the outstanding example why Korea has become a top country. Why don't you link up with that institution? In Taiwan, it's ITRI. And ITRI is the one that grow the computer and the wafer fab economy of Taiwan. Link that to your knowledge, the European knowledge innovation community. So this is the sort of thing that we are doing at the ground level to get Europe and the developing world together. Now, as far as the turning the what you call like councils of science and technology in Latin America into Ministry of Science and Technology, I think in Asia we have done much better. We have been having Ministry of Science and Technology. But what is more important, in the British system that we follow, we have also chief scientists to the government. The chief scientists, like Malaysia, we have the scientific advisor to the Prime Minister. In England, there's a chief scientist. In Australia, there's a chief scientist. And in England, in New Zealand now, every ministry had a scientific advisor. Every ministry. And in England, the last ministry that resisted this idea was the Ministry of Finance. Finally, even the Ministry of Finance had a science advisor. Now, under the initiative of New Zealand, which is also a TPP member country, the chief scientist of New Zealand had brought together all his colleagues from different parts, all the chief scientists to the heads of government together to form a global network so that they can exchange information of what is best practice in one country that can be, translated for the similar action in another country. So I think this is some initiative I feel that Latin America should join with the rest of the network. Finally, about TPP. During the lunch break, all the foreign delegates to this conference, they went to visit secondary school and also primary school. I stayed behind to interact with the participants, the Chilean participants of this conference, because I felt that they have not direct interaction with foreign. And what I found from them is that they now like to go to Asia. These are the young lecturers from Chilean University, and also the biology graduate who are now teaching in secondary and primary school. So to me, I said that, why don't we start this TPP education, the blank sheet, with exchange of young scientists. So let us do it not with TPP 12 countries. Why don't we do it with Chile and Malaysia? Because we have established the close relationship. So if ambassador here is agreeable that we explore this in Chile, I can go back and get my government to try to say, why don't we exchange, young university students from Chile to Malaysia and Malaysian students to Chile, but also even at faculty level. And I told the young Chilean at lunch break, if they come to Malaysia, we can arrange for them, like say for 3 months, we can arrange for them to visit Thailand, to visit Singapore, and to visit Indonesia. And then it will become a Chile-ASEAN cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Li Yong. I just will underline what you are saying about South-South cooperation and what's possible to be done in terms of also using the treaties that exist. The idea of the chief scientist is fantastic. I agree with you, and I have seen this in several, mainly countries from the Northern Hemisphere. We in Chile have not a chief scientist. I have my personal one, who is Dr. Allende, but you see what happened. Now I am working for him, so it's not a good business finally. But anyway, that's a very concrete way in which science can be in connection with government. And it is a very simple idea that we're involved. It's not only a matter that we need scientists to seduce the government, but at the same time the politicians or the people in charge in the government need to learn and understand about what's the logic of science, being this a kind of this common language. Okay, one more thing before I give the floor to, I received a request from Daniel Wan from La Mano de la Paz. He would like to express some ideas based on his experience.
I am from Korea. That Lee Chung mentioned about Korea, so I think it's quite appropriate time come up this podium to say something about. And you know that Korea has been the aid recipient country, and now we are aid giving country, so we are the DAC members. DAC means development aid countries of the OECD. So I would like to mention about there is another good source of money, because to have international collaboration to support science education projects, that means you need money. And the OECD has a good program of official development aid. We call it ODA projects, and every member country has to commit some percentage of their GDP for this purpose. And for the case of Korea, it's about 1.2%, but we can't do that until now, but we still commit our 0.8%, if I remember correctly, of our GDP to these ODA programs.
And under these ODA programs, Korean government has bilateral aid programs with developing countries. And I'm an engineering research scientist, and appropriate technology is the good item for these ODA projects. Setting up some of the solar panels in remote villages in Nepal, Cambodia, Laos, and as I am the former president of ASA, ASA is the IAP Global Network representing Asia. It has 30 member countries from Turkey to Siberian border to Alaska and down to Australia and New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands are our territory, Asian territory. And Asia has very diverse countries, from Middle East to, and also that Central Asian countries. So that we have the developed countries and developing countries together. And Korea has the unique position that from developing countries transformed into developed countries. So Korea has the very fresh memories of how to overcome this kind of economic barriers. And as a Korean engineer to participate in those, the journey from the developing countries to developed countries, I can see what is the problem of the poor countries when I visit their country. Right away, I can set up some kind of grand planning of how to overcome that kind of things. And the science education, I think, is a very important item. Science means science and technology, and education. I think that's science and technology education is the kind of the backbone of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Without education, you can't have any good economy. And without technology, you don't have any economy. So we can persuade the UN bodies that science and education is very important. So science education is most important in that way. But personally, I have big disappointment to the UNESCO. UNESCO's duty is science and education. But we are talking about so far. IPSI has a problem, and Dr. Lee Chung said that he finally persuaded Irina Bokova to say something about the IBSC. That means so far UNESCO hasn't done anything about this science education. And my personal experience in Korea too, when science goes into the Ministry of Education, science is a long-term problem, so they only worry about education. Science is put that in the farther corner of their offices. So that's why we do have this Ministry of Science Technology, and the science education is mostly supported through Ministry of Science Technology. So I think the Chile has just in the formative stage of the setting of Ministry of Science Technology. So I think science education will be taken good care of in Chile from now on. And as I mentioned about this ODA program, so I think OECD headquarters and UNESCO headquarters is all in Paris. So you better ask OECD, that the governance team, that the science education should be in their one part of the ODA programs, so they can set up some guidelines for these member nations to support ODA. I would like to coin new terminology that appropriate technology has been supported through these ODA programs in many developing countries, and so we can say it's kind of an appropriate education, because mostly least developed economies, they can't do the IPSI right away. They do need some appropriate, education system first, then move on to this real, the advanced IBSE system. So I think that the appropriate education we can persuade OECD or even the UN bodies, UNESCO, that they have to support financially as a priority area in the coming future, and I think that the time is now.
Is something that we have listened here in Chile a lot of times, because for us Korea is like a like-minded country. In what sense? Let's say 40 years ago, Korea was a commodity-based country. It was based in agriculture, and now it's a really well-developed country. And we use the expression in Chile here when we discuss about human capital formation, we talk about the Korean model. In some moment, Korea has more than 30 to 40,000 students doing their PhDs outside the country. So they changed the country with education. And we did, when we organized in Chile what we call the Becas Chile, the Scholarship Chile, was a plan that started, we initially, let's say, 8 years ago, we were like having something like 200, 300 PhD scholarships a year. Now we have more than 1,000. And the idea was how we can do this massively, high speed, and focused. And that's the way we need to work in education. So this is exactly what we are doing here, and this is a living example of what Korea is doing. Thank you.
We are, of course, discussing of international collaboration in science education, but we are at a rather high level, I would say, of intergovernmental agreement, globalization, public policies, and so on. And maybe I may remind you finally, because we have spoken several times of La Main à la Pâte, the action of La Main à la Pâte, what are in fact some practical aspects and more important, the experience we gain in the different action we made within the international context. So don't take into account the title, which is because I adapted that very very quickly. Okay, so next. So what are the lessons that we get from this international cooperation, which started, I remind you, about, say, actually 15 years ago about. The La Main à la Pâte was born 20 years ago, and the international action started a few years later. Okay, so how helping to move a country to IBSE? So that's, I remind you, that's our views. Of course, this is mainly through bilateral, but also multilateral cooperation. And we see with, for instance, cooperation with ISTIC, this is a good example. And that's so mainly through trainers training and free resources which are offered. What we can say also that it is very important to have a strong scientific and institutional relay. And the role of the academies has always been recognized as really important, and especially IEP, of course, YANAS, NASAC, ALEA, and so on. They were really very strong support, and this is clear. And there is also the role of international, intergovernmental ministries, or of course, something like UNESCO and so on. Also, the importance of regional cooperation centers, we want to stress that, and especially we have heard of that, Rexam, ISTIC, and also for instance, the European Union program, the Fibonacci program was an example. Okay, so here is summary of this experience in supporting the national strategies. First, and I'm sorry, Natalie, but again, we are speaking of pilot program. Yes, we have first to design a pilot program because we cannot start really from a global national action at the national level. Really, the experience shows that that should be a progressive implementation. You start from something which is solid, but which is rather modest, and then you use for that two main entry points, which are the resources, so resources which are provided and adapted to the country, and then, of course, the professional development of educators through training and training of trainers, of course. Another important aspect is to really bring together the Ministry of Education. This is the only way to really have the feasibility, the sustainability, and the dissemination after that. But after, of course, when the things are getting more and more important. And also, you know that this has been said several times, but you can repeat it, bringing together the scientific community. This assure one for the first point, the quality of the science education contents. This is important because, for instance, the Academy of Science can give a stamp, I would say, on what is offered in the contents. And also, that's probably even more important, the advocacy towards the decision makers. This is something else which is really, we consider important. Okay, so the well-established was a basic model, and probably that's not the only one, but that's one which has proven to be efficient in a few cases. So to have first a multi-stakeholders approach, as again to start with a pilot project, so typically a 3 years period, to have several sessions of training of trainers and assume an adequate follow-up. That's very important to have this follow-up of those trainers, how they will train teachers, and how those teachers are putting in operation what they have learned. Providing resource, of course, and other support when possible, and of course with open resource, free resource, and using internet at maximum. And this is clearly something which was very important because, as Pierre-Léna mentioned, for instance, our website is accessed about 3 million times per year, and this is proof that really teachers are using that kind of resource. And probably one of the most important is to make sure that there is really a dedicated coordination, that's dedicated persons that make really a program developing, and but okay, you you have to find the good team, and then you can start the progressive dissemination, and this is done more or less naturally. Okay, so you know that LAMAP has developed, contributed to the professional development of educators through IBSC, of course. You know, you see about now certainly more than 3,000 people, probably 4,000 people have been trained in this period, mainly in the non-European countries. So there has been 74 sessions which are free, in fact, and so mainly in the developing countries, as I said. This is just to illustrate the international cooperation of La Main à la Pâte around the world. And well, another number, in 2014, we have trained 633 trainers in 6 different countries. Access of resources, this is a few examples adapted among many of them, but you can see the tip of the topic, for instance, the climate, my planet and myself, discoveries in Islamic countries, and so on. And I give here just an example of success, which is Colombia, for instance. Because there is not always a success, we must be sure of that. So this started in 2001 with 5 schools, as you can see, and you see now 10 years later there are 2,000 teachers and 100,000 pupils which are concerned by this program. With a dissemination, we continued. There is a good national coordination. There are a strong team of educators, and now the learning resources are made locally, so they are completely autonomous. And there is also partnership with business, which is something very, very important. Okay, so, and just finally, something like I just remind this kind of model, but which is not, as I mentioned, that's not a strict, unique model, of course. And it must be adapted to each country. But so this type of model, I would say, is it's provided through this LAMAP International Seminar, which is now we are the seventh ones. Typically, there are 40 to 50 people, who generally are 2 people from one country, which are coming during 1 week in Paris. And so there is a strong, very important level of exchanges, and I think that's something which is very important. The exchange, that's not only something which go in one direction, but there is exchange of experience between the participants, and this is very important. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just would like in a few minutes tell you about an experience which was not very successful, unfortunately, of trying to have cooperation between northern countries and southern countries. This was a project which was developed immediately after the first AIMASE conference, of which I was talking this morning, which is AIMASE stands for African, European, Mediterranean Academies for Science Education. And after the first conference, there was a huge consensus in preparing a project to be submitted to the European Union. The project was among 15 partners. There were 5 academies, national academies, 8 CPD providers, the Biblioteca Alexandrina, which is a library science museum, and 2 networks of academies, ALIA and NASAC. The project leader was the Foundation La Mano a la Pâte, so we had good, strong shoulders, but unfortunately this was not enough. The main aims of the project was to capitalize on the capacities of science academies and institutions devoted to teachers' educations and teachers' professional development in some African nations. And the AIMASE proposes to disseminate in Africa innovative learning methods in science education, which have been very well trained, very well experimented in Europe, especially through some other projects which have been financed by the European Union, like Fibonacci project. Well, the project, I think I was not the one who put up the project, but I was among the persons who did the project, but La Mano alla Parte again as the main was the coordinator. Unfortunately, the project was rejected. I'm showing you here the reasons, main reasons why the European Commission rejected. On the first criterion, the excellence criterion, the criticism was the proposal does not address a specific goal, objectives in Horizon 2020, and the relevance of the proposal for European youth's interest in STEM is not evident. How this proposal will boost the interest of young people in STEM in Europe is unclear, and as far as the impact is concerned, the proposal is expected to have a cross-cutting impact on political and educational authorities and on policies. However, the envisaged impact in Europe in accordance to the goal is not strong. So these are the main reasons why the project was not funded. And following the second conference in Dakar, we elaborated a letter which was sent to the European Commissioner just in these days, and this has the signature of both the ALEA and NASAC organization. Now, very recently, the European Commission has established a group of experts who have elaborated a report which is called Science Education for Responsible Citizenship, which I think is very, very important. It just came out last August, and these are the recommendations that the report is giving back to the European Commission. Most of the recommendations which are written in the report have really been said several times in this conference and in other conferences, so they can be shared by, I think, by most of the people participating to this conference. I would like to underline the sixth recommendation, which places emphasis on connecting innovation and science education strategies at local, regional, national, European and international levels, taking into account societal needs and global developments. I think this is a very important recommendation. And so following this, our science education group has commented. I will not bother you with this, but I think it is very important that, Well, I think it is very important if we focus on especially the sixth recommendation. I think we are encouraged if European Communion is setting up a program, a specific call, which is concerned with science education. Probably we will have better chances to succeed in the future application. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Daniel Caffi, Ministry of Education. Well, one of the questions that has been proposed is how do we actually convince governments to implement with greater strength these inquiry-based scientific programs? In reality, well, Jorge is here. He started these initiatives here in Chile. He has been working on this for many years, and he could express that it's been very difficult to take this to the national level. And the other important thing is how we actually get the resources for this. part of the answer. I don't know if it's the complete answer, but the first thing that we have proposed is to have the cooperation of the institutions that are within the country itself. Today we are connecting with Explora, who came about through CONICIT, and we've also been in touch with 3 universities today. What we have had is the development, or today, no, I mean presently, we have a project with 3 universities. We're in the first stage that will start in 2015 to 2017. What we have done is propose through 3 universities what are the country's more urgent needs. How can we actually make the country decide, well, this is where our science teachers need. Look at the institutions. How do we actually change institutionality, create a new institutionality? Today we have schools that have resources, and we can tell them, okay, use those resources for science. But to do that, we need our teachers to gather with the scientific community. We're just proposing this right now. It's in its first stages. We hope this is a positive route. We've also been proposing that everything needs to have a trajectory, a focus on education from preschool up to secondary school. We need to have a vision. How's the entire educational journey? Students should be exposed to the learning of science. Obviously, this has been difficult. This means that we need to generate different instances and opportunities. The geography of our country makes it difficult to have all these competencies throughout the region. We've always looked at methods of cooperation to achieve this. Hopefully, we could convince those that have the budgets in their hands of how these initiatives are implemented. These are some of the activities that we have been proposing from the ISEC program, which is our science program. And I would like to say that our cooperation concept, we have taken that, embodied it in the exchange. The important thing of foreign programs or corporations is that they keep programs alive. Programs come and go, or they have difficulties, but foreign cooperation have had a great impact. ISEC has had their comings and goings with different governments, but fortunately, international exchange and cooperation has been very important. We have national seminars organized from the ministry. We have more or less support in different cases, but the inquiry-based scientific approach is always been present. Also would like to mention that the institution that has been our most important partner, we have the Chilean French Institute, depends on the Embassy of France, and they support us a lot with this type of exchange programs. So as I was saying, maybe how we convince governments has a lot to do with first how we convince institutions within the country to achieve this vision of scientific and technological development in the country.
First of all, the Commission is not allowed to to call for experts for evaluation. Experts have to register themselves in the website of the Commission. And once these are registered, then the Commission goes and select who has actually put their name on. Obviously, most of the very good people don't really have the time to do evaluation, so that is a big problem. Second is the fact that now the rejection rate has gone up to about I think the success rate is about 18%, and that is very, very low. So what they have decided, and it will happen, is that now you will go through a 2-step process to save time. So you don't spend months preparing something that then is not accepted. So there will be an evaluation for a short presentation of 5 pages, and then there will be selected ones who will be called for look at. And the other thing that is going to happen is the transparency of the process. many people would like to see transparency there, that most of the evaluation would be open to everybody. And mainly because of the fact that some of these programs are so complex that to be able to have every single expert sitting there usually doesn't happen. So.
Yes, I'm Oscar Graud. I'm from Universidad de La Plata. I have worked for many years with Relab. And from this cooperation, I would like to go back to the header, the title of this meeting, which is the International Cooperation to Support projects for education in science. So we're speaking of international cooperation for these projects, and we're all convinced of the need of increasing education in sciences at every level of our society. And for that to have an impact on society, so society understands the need for the development of science to achieve the development of society on the whole. So we have to ask ourselves, what is science at this stage? And in what way? And what type of cooperation is it that we actually need? It's easy to see that in many of these projects, they're very efficient in saying what can be done and what can't be done, and how it's convenient to enter into these international cooperation agreements. It's clear that, first of all, we have to see what we need to develop in our countries, what is the model of development that we want in our countries. And this model in the region has basically been to produce commodities for others to manufacture them into intermediate and finished products. And this is a tradition of our region. There are many elements within society that have been developed through this model, feel comfortable here, and have been maybe the cause for the lack of development of technological processes in our region that could take us to important levels of development, such as occurred in Korea, for example. So in terms of science, the first thing that we need to do is to convince our authorities in each of our countries which is the model of science that we want, what is the type of the development that we want for our countries, and how we can actually go about this. And obviously obtain the resources that we need from the countries and from international cooperation, always taking into account the need for a model of development for that given countries or the region. Because obviously we can't develop independently if we don't cooperate as a region.
Well, thank you very much. I want to bring here the point of view of the scientific associations. So I want to just mention that IUBMB is taking now very seriously science education. I think so far international unions have taken care about research mainly. But now we, at least at IUBMB, we want to change the way biochemistry and molecular biology is taught. Curiously, Bruce Alberts is a biochemist, so he's a professor of biochemistry. So he has produced a lot of documents and a lot of theory of how science should be taught. Now we want to apply his conclusions to his science, which is biochemistry and molecular biology. I think now you're going to see a big effort of IUBMB in this field through 2 education conferences, one next year in Israel, the other one in 3 years in the US. And I am looking forward to organize another one in some place in Africa, perhaps in Malaysia or in Thailand would be the appropriate places. So I think the scientific unions should be active players also in this business. And we are going to do it. Thank you very much.